So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for this pre-application conference call for the Education Research Practice Partnership with the District of Columbia. My name is Justin Tooley. I'm the Special Assistant for Legislation and Policy at OSSE. I'm joined by two of my colleagues at OSSE, Shauna Young, the Chief of Staff, and Tiffany Oates, our General Counsel. And we are glad that you have expressed interest in our Education Research Practice Partnership. The purpose of today's conference is to provide background on the partnership. As you know, OSSE published a notice of invitation for proposals for an RPP partner on December 13th, 2019. This webinar will walk through the components of the NOI and the procedure for proposal submission. We will also be available to answer questions regarding the NOI. We will pause for questions at various points through the presentation and unmute you at that time. We will also post responses to questions on the website. First, I will provide you with context on how we have arrived at today's conference call. The District of Columbia Education Research Practice Partnership Establishment and Audit Act of 2018 outlined a process for the creation of an Education Research Practice Partnership. The RPP shall conduct independent education-related research that will support improvement in the district's public schools and shall publicly report the findings of the research. The Office of the State Superintendent of Education, or OSSE, is leading the search for a research partner to comply with this local law. OSSE published a notice of invitation for proposals for a partner for the RPP on December 13th, 2019, and that notice of invitation can be found in two places. One, on the District of Columbia Register, and on OSSE's website at the link provided. This slide provides some broad information about the notice of invitation and its structure. The notice of invitation was drafted by the executive and transmitted to the council for review and feedback. The purpose of the NOI is to provide context and background information, procedural logistics for submission, proposal requirements, and is divided into three broad sections: general information about the DC context, background on the Education Research Practice Partnership, and proposal requirements. Next, we will provide additional context and background for what the district is looking to accomplish with the RPP. The RPP shall conduct independent education-related research that will support improvement in the district's public schools and shall publicly report the findings of the research. The partnership will conduct research to identify instructional practices that increase student achievement, provide the research necessary to inform and assess instructional practices in the district, evaluate existing instructional practices and their impact on student achievement, and assist the district with research aimed to improve instruction and student outcomes. The RPP will also work with the advisory committee to develop and implement a research agenda. There are also two eligibility requirements. The first is that eligible applicants for the partnership include a university, college, nonprofit organization, or a consortium that combines university, college, nonprofit organizations that are joined together for the purposes of the partnership. The second requirement is that eligible applicants for the partnership shall demonstrate a commitment to enter into the partnership for no less than 10 years. The notice of invitation outlines requirements for submitted proposals. Submitted proposals shall meet the following requirements. The proposal shall not exceed 30 typed pages, excluding the table of contents and any appendices. Any supporting documentation must be included in the appendices. Pages must have 1-inch margins on all sides. Pages shall be numbered and correspond to the table of contents. The order of sections in the proposal shall correspond to the proposal requirements in Section 3 of the NOI, and proposals including all appendices and any supporting documents shall be aggregated into a single PDF document and submitted as such. And the notice of invitation provides instructions for submission. Proposals, including all submission documentation, shall be submitted in the required format, as on the previous slide. Proposals are submitted to educationrppnoi@dc.gov. The completed application package must be received no later than February 10th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and OSSI reserves the right to not consider incomplete submissions. To be clear, the deadline for submissions is February 10th, 2020. There was a typo on our website that has since been corrected that read that the deadline was February 20th, 2020. The notice of invitation contains the correct date, which again is February 10th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Once proposals are submitted, they will be reviewed by a 6-person review panel equally divided between representatives of the mayor and the chairman of the council. Evaluation of the plan will be based on the following: the entity's experience and expertise, the soundness of the proposed service delivery plan, the adequacy and reasonableness of proposed resources needed, and the demonstrated capability for managing the proposed RPP. The decision of the review panel is the district's final decision and is not subject to appeal or further review. As of the date of this presentation, the panel has not been selected, and at this time, we will pause for our first round of questions. So I'm going to unmute. Yes, go ahead, Shauna.
This is Shauna Young, Chief of Staff at OSSI. We'll take questions now and again at the end. For the purposes of answering questions on this webinar, we will answer questions if we are prepared to answer them factually and briefly at this time. And if not, we will take your question and be prepared to respond to it in further publication of our FAQ on our website.
Are there any questions from anyone?
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
So I was just curious about the evaluation of the plan. Do you all plan to develop sort of a rubric and point system and to formally score the proposals, or will it be a more subjective process where the 6 folks will just get together, discuss, and come to a decision?
Can you repeat the question one more time for us, please?
Sure. I was curious whether, for other government proposals, I know sometimes you'll have a rubric with a point system, and there'll be certain points assigned to, different criteria, like the 4 bullet points you have on the slide. So I was curious whether you're going to have a formal scoring system or whether it'll just be more of a subjective process where the 6-person committee reads the proposals they receive and then just comes to a decision.
There is no evaluation materials published at this time. And the committee will be reviewing according to the standards set out in the actual application and the NOI.
Thank you.
Also, if people who are asking questions would be able to identify themselves when they ask, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. And that one was, this is Matt Chingos at the Urban Institute.
Thanks, Matt. Other questions?
All right. Well, then we will proceed to the next section, which is on proposal requirements. I will not read the proposal requirements verbatim, but I will provide an overview for each requirement. For more specifics, you should refer to the notice of invitation. In case you are following along with the notice of invitation, we have flagged the relevant section of the notice for you at the bottom of each slide. Proposals will include an executive summary that will preview the proposal to the reviewer. Then we are looking for general information about the applicant. The proposal should include a statement of mission for the applicant, as well as a commitment to partner with the District of Columbia for no less than 10 years. In the period of commitment, we are looking for information that demonstrates that the applicant can meet this commitment, for example, an organizational history and a description of financial supports to uphold the commitment. We are also looking for an indication of whether the applicant is applying as a consortium. The NOI asks for the entity to provide a vision for the district's education research practice partnership. The vision should speak to how the partnership with the District of Columbia will meet statutory requirements and the responsibilities and duties described earlier in the NOI. The next section of the NOI asks for evidence of the entity's knowledge and expertise. We are looking for the applicant's expertise in education research for urban school districts and states. We are looking for a description of quantitative and qualitative work, as well as specific examples and artifacts related to that work. The proposal should describe expertise that the entity has in partnering with government. We are looking for an indication of how the prospective partner will collaborate with the government throughout the life of a research project. Finally, we are looking to see that the entity is able to leverage best practices of research practice partnerships in other states and cities, and how those would be able to be applied to the district's unique context. Continuing on in knowledge and expertise, we are looking for the entity's philosophy for designing and maintaining an RPP. We are looking for a list and description of the entity's partnerships or alliances with public and or private entities, along with evidence of those partnerships. Finally, we are looking for a partner that exhibits expertise in coordinating and conducting community outreach. We are looking for how the applicant would engage a broad group of stakeholders and examples of how the entity has presented research findings to diverse audiences. The next section of the NOI pertains to partnership personnel and collaboration. The NOI asks for a description of the entity's current staffing level and personnel that would be dedicated to the partnership. The NOI also asks for an explanation of the applicant's processes to collaborate with a large and diverse advisory committee. Note that the advisory committee's composition is codified in DC Code 38785.04. Broadly, the advisory committee is comprised of 21 members representing government stakeholders, teachers and school leader representatives, and other education stakeholders. Because the research partner would be able to have access to student-level data to conduct its research, applicants must be able to clearly describe their data use and protection processes. The NOI requires that the entity explain its expertise in data security and its ability to comply with applicable laws governing data privacy and security. The NOI requires the applicant to submit a data management and security plan. The plan must describe how the applicant will ensure that only those authorized to obtain sensitive data are able to do so. The plan should be aligned with best practices and include a description of the technology platform that will be used to protect data assets. The plan must include the information security model that will be implemented to ensure that security policies are applied, and methods for data destruction when research is completed. In the next section, the NOI also asks for information pertaining to research methods. The entity should be able to describe internal review processes and protocols to ensure the validity of research methods and outcomes. The entity should be able to describe processes and protocols concerning the reliability and validity of data and statistical analyses and how the entity will ensure quality research. The entity should be able to provide an explanation of how it will work in an independent manner. Finally, the NOI requires that the entity provide information on financial management and a proposed budget. The NOI asks the entity to describe its financial management and internal accounting procedures, as well as potential funding sources. For funding sources, the entity should identify any funds needed, if any, from the district for initial startup costs and annual operations. The entity should also provide a proposed budget for initial startup costs and the annual costs needed to operate the partnership. Finally, the entity should be able to describe what type and level of institutional support the entity will provide to the partnership. We will again pause for questions. Go ahead with any question.
This is Matt Chingos again. I have another question.
Yes.
I was just curious, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the district has not set aside any resources, so that this is not a competition for any money. So I was just curious how you're thinking about the part asking what resources would be needed from the district, given that the district has not set aside any resources at this time. So yeah, any more you could provide on that? This
is Shauna Young. That's correct. There's not a competition for funding, and there are no funds distributed at this time. I believe that the NOI anticipated that there may be future requests for funding from applicants. And so that's why that information was included, for the information to review about potential future interest in such funding.
And I think also, this is Tiffany Oates, Assistant General Counsel, if there's any impact on the ability to enter into that 10-year commitment based on like availability of resources, that would be important information to share, particularly around like what kind of resources you would need to be able to sustain that 10-year commitment.
That's helpful.
Hi, this is Elizabeth Grant. I wondered if the slides are going to be available after the webinar?
Yes, we will as quickly as possible put the slides and also anticipate putting a recorded version of this webinar up on our website.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
This is Shauna Young. We did receive some questions in advance. I will note that a number of them are related to the applicants and or potential future partners' engagement with the advisory committee. I think for the purposes of this call, I want to acknowledge that there were a couple of questions about that, and to articulate that the question was asked because we do anticipate that the partner who would be finally selected would be engaging with the advisory committee in a number of ways, but we will propose to print as much of a robust answer as we can on the website in the FAQ after this call.
So we will continue, and then we'll have one more opportunity for questions. So I'm going to mute everybody, and we'll finish out and then proceed with one more round of questions. So we will conclude with some next steps. Again, you may continue to submit questions at the following email address, educationrppnoy@dc.gov. We will take questions in this inbox until January 31st, 2020. Upon submitting a question, we will respond back to you and post answers to questions on the OSSI website throughout the application window. And then finally, I wanted to remind you of key dates. We posted the NOI on December 13th, 2019. We will again take questions until January the 31st, 2020, and proposals are due on February the 10th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And with that, if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask away.
This is Shauna Young. While we're waiting, if there's any other further questions, I'll answer one more question that was submitted prior to the beginning of this webinar. There was a question related to section 3.1.4, which requires an applicant to describe the entity's experience and expertise in conducting and disseminating quantitative and qualitative research on education topics relevant to state education systems in urban areas. The question being, does this reference to education topics relevant to state education systems in urban areas include only pre-K-12 public education, or could the eventual scope of work include higher education, post-secondary, and workforce career prep expertise? The brief answer for the webinar is that the interest is in understanding further the applicant's experience in the actual experience of conducting and disseminating research itself, and on education topics relevant to state education systems as well as urban areas. It does not limit the scope of the actual potential future research, which would be dependent on a large number of things, including availability of data, including the research agenda designed by the advisory committee, and a number of other items, but it is not meant to limit specifically the content of the research. Are there any other questions or clarifications for those on the meeting right now? We'd be happy to answer them. As Justin mentioned, we'll also soliciting further questions that we'll post in writing, answers to which we'll post in writing.
Hi, this is Megan Gallagher from the Urban Institute. I have a question about these key dates. For the January 31st deadline for questions to be posed, when will responses be posted? Is there a sort of a sense of how long the turnaround will take? And relatedly, once proposals are submitted on February 10th, will there be an acknowledgement that the proposal has been received?
We'll start with the second question first. Yes, you will receive an email saying that we submitted, that we received your application from the email inbox. And on the first question regarding timeline,
I think, yeah, our response would be as soon as possible. If we can, it may depend a little bit on the content of the question, and if we can commit to a date in advance, we'll post that on the website as well.
I think we're hoping to get as many questions up front and for folks not to wait until the 31st deadline to submit questions. And it will continue to try to answer the questions as we're receiving them and posting them on our website, so that information is constantly being updated. But we'll do it as quickly as possible after that deadline. It just kind of depends on the context of that situation, with how many questions we get and how detailed.
Thank you.
This is Matt again. Sean, it sounded like you alluded to this maybe being another question you received, but since it wasn't from us, I just wanted to put the question out there, and if it's the same, feel free to punt on this until the written response is. But I just wanted to confirm, my sense from reading this is that the selected partner would not be responsible for sort of staffing and convening the advisory committee, but obviously there'd be a relationship of interacting with the advisory committee, but that would be staffed and convened by government. But I wanted to confirm that was the case, or whether it would be expected that the research partner would do that work.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think that's one of a number of nuanced questions related to that topic that we received, and I think it'd be easier for us to just post an answer in writing, and as much as clarity as we're able to provide.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We just received one other question related to the data available to this partnership, and to that we would also refer back to the actual solicitation, and we'll provide further information if possible in writing, also in the FAQ.
all right. Well, with that, again, feel free to submit your questions to our email inbox, and we hope to hear from you soon, and we look forward to reviewing your proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You as well.